Welcome, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. Let's start as we always do by taking a half an hour or so to sit and meditate. So if you'd like to take a moment to get comfortable, find a stable position for the body. Do whatever you need, move around or wiggle. And when you find that posture, just letting the body settle into stillness. You might take a few deep breaths. Relaxing on the exhale. On your own time, you might let the pattern of deep breathing go. Let the breath come more naturally. And you might notice what the breath is like. Just very gently, gently, gently. Let attention rest on the breath. The breath is always changing. It's always in motion. There's always something to notice. What is the breath doing? How is it moving? There's not any need to change it or to fix it. It's just to notice. Just let the breath arise in peace. Let it come and go as it pleases. Notice that as you direct attention away from thought or distraction back into the breath, it might feel like it takes a little bit of effort, maybe just very small, a very gentle exercise, but some effort. But also notice that the breath arises in awareness all on its own, without any effort at all. The breath simply comes and goes without you needing to do anything. Notice that there is a receptive quality to awareness. It doesn't take any input or energy from you. There's simply awareness. What is present in awareness? It could be a mind gently directing attention on the breath. It could be a mind wrestling with a thought. It could be a mind completely at peace. It could be something else entirely. But whatever is present, notice that it is effortlessly known. There is just awareness. What is present in awareness? Notice if the mind is trying to find awareness, to change awareness, to bring it into being, to hold it stable. Awareness is not an object. Those are not things the mind can do. That's occurring. What's present is awareness knowing a mind trying to see awareness. The only thing to do with awareness is to simply notice it's there. Notice this truth or fact of existence. There is awareness. Sometimes awareness takes the form of a mind of various flavors. Mind lost in thought, mind planning, daydreaming, worrying. Sometimes awareness takes the form of a sight or sound or smell. There is just awareness. Notice awareness has the quality of receptivity. Awareness doesn't play favorites. The mind plays favorites. The mind sees something it likes, wants to hold on to it. Sees something it doesn't like, it wants to push it away. The mind wants to change the world. Awareness knows the unpleasant and the pleasant in just the same way. No difference. Awareness has no agenda to the world. Awareness simply is. When we let our self-concept rest in thought, in the mind, this changeable, flighty thing takes us along for the ride, and we suffer. But when we rest in and as awareness, experience takes on the quality of receptivity, acceptance, and peace. Awareness has no agenda with the world. Awareness is okay just as it is. Does not need anything to be different. in this last minute or two, you can let go. Simply rest. Simply be. No agenda. What does it mean to have an open heart? The Buddha said to teach the Dhamma that's good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. Meaning Dhamma that's applicable to someone who's just started the practice, somebody who's kind of made some progress, and someone towards the end. And having an open heart is good Dhamma. So it's something that's with us throughout all of practice. But our perspective changes as we practice. We step out of this understanding of ourselves as this separate, limited being into something greater. And so our understanding of what it means to have an open heart changes too. It's held in a different way. It's expressed in a different way. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. When we come to practice, maybe what it means to have an open heart is to care about your own suffering, to care about the suffering of this body and this mind. I think most folks have, some kind of grasp on that, but sometimes the mind can get just so caught up in its problems and try so hard to solve them, and fail and fail again and fail again, and just get into this place of despair, and into this place where it can't even try and relieve the suffering. That's where very depressed folks end up. You can get stuck in thinking that change is impossible, that there's no hope, no way out. But if you're in this place, the thing to see is that, to look out at the people around you and see that people can make change. People can find their way out of suffering. You can also see, this is one of my favorite quotes from the Buddha. He said that you can look the whole world over and not find one person, not one person who is more worthy of compassion than you. And this is true. You can see this is true. You are no different from anyone else. You are just as worthy of being cared for. So I think that even if folks, are not seeing the world that way, there might be a mistake that some folks make. We hear this this idea that we should care for others and we should be selfless. And there's certainly some truth to that, but I think some folks take it in a way that leads them to ignore their own suffering, to say that this is not important, I need to focus on other people ahead of myself. There's a good sutta that talks about this. It's the Acrobat Sutta. This is SN 4719. And if you haven't heard the sutta, so there's two acrobats, a master acrobat and apprentice acrobat. And they do this act where the master climbs up a bamboo pole, and the apprentice climbs up the pole and climbs up the master, and he stands on top of him, and they have to, balance. And it seems pretty dangerous to me. And the master, I guess, understands this and says, we both need to be taken care of. So why don't I look out for you, apprentice, and why don't you look out for me, and then we'll both be covered. And the apprentice says, maybe that's not the best way. Maybe I look out for me and you look out for you, and then we'll both be covered. So of course they go to the Buddha to resolve this dispute, and the Buddha says, no, the apprentice is right. That's the way to do things. You should look after yourself first. There's two things I understand from this. The first is kind of this maybe like a visceral understanding. So if you think about what that must be like for the apprentice acrobat on top of the master, maybe he's kind of out of balance and he's sort of swaying this way and that. It's easier for him to correct that imbalance than the master. The master doesn't know how he's moving. And I think it's that way with our own suffering too, right? Your suffering is more legible to you than to anyone else. You have more leverage to deal with your suffering than somebody else. It's not that somebody else can't help you or kind of contribute to that, but it's easier for you to take care of than someone else. The other point that I get from that sutta is that if you are suffering, you are not seeing the world clearly. So if you are suffering and you're trying to solve someone else's suffering, you're probably not going to be able to be all that effective at it. I guess I see this in activist circles sometimes. Folks look out at the world and see the suffering and very rightly want to help alleviate that, but maybe they're not in a good place with it themselves. Maybe they're angry about what's happening or fearful, and they try and act on that. And what happens is they're putting out anger or fear into the world. And maybe they're making some kind of helpful contribution to this solution too, but what they're doing is putting out anger and fear into the world. So I think it's generally more helpful to take care of yourself first. And so we practiced in this place for a while. For me, it was a long time. It was many years, or at least several years, where I was practicing, mainly for myself. But as we do this, we start to notice something. We start to notice that our suffering is not separate from the world around us, the suffering of the world around us. You can see this in kind of a blunt way by, if the folks around you are all unhappy and angry, you're probably going to be that way too, or at least you're going to be pulled in that direction. And it's the same way if the folks around you are, happy and loving and full of kindness, you're probably going to be pulled in that direction too. And so what it means to have an open heart is to care about yourself, but also care about others. And there's a lot to learn in this space too. This place where we're open to our suffering and open to other people's suffering, but there's still this barrier up between us. We care about both of those things, but we're still trying to figure out how permeable that barrier between me and you is. So one of the things we learn is, I like to think of it as the kinetics of karma, right? So we see that, if somebody comes at me with, say anger or something, my kind of instinctive response could be anger. And in that case, we see something might happen like, anger comes to me and anger goes out, and maybe it goes back and forth, and then we part ways, and I'm still angry, and the next person I come to, I kind of give them anger too, or some other afflictive emotion, and the other person does the same, and the pattern may be very different, like other afflictive emotions, or different kind of transmission path, but it's like we see that karma is that way. And we also see what stops that chain of karma is an open heart. Like if somebody comes at me with anger, they're trying to get something out of me. They're trying to get something psychological out of me. Perhaps they're afraid of me, and they're trying to get a sense of safety. They're trying to push me away or harm me so they can feel safe. If I meet that anger with love, well, first that karma is not going to propagate past me. There's no sort of impression that's made, but also that love that I can share with that person speaks to whatever he's trying to find, speaks to that sense of safety that he's looking for, tells him you are okay. And this is true of the other afflictive emotions, that same general pattern. So we see that it actually never makes sense to have anything but an open heart when we engage with the world. It just doesn't make sense. There's a teaching I like in the I think it's the Visuddhimagga. It's one of the commentaries. It's the hot coal teaching. The idea that somebody who's angry at someone else, it's like picking up a hot coal and throwing it at them, right? You might hurt that person, like if you hit them, but you're certainly going to hurt yourself because you've picked up this hot coal. And I always kind of broaden that to the understanding that closing off your heart is hurtful in that same way. Like we close off our heart to others for many different reasons, but it's always harmful to us. It's when we share our love with the world, it's often conditional. Like we might like our partner very much, and the conditions might be kind of very easy to meet, but there could be some circumstances where your partner does something or acts some way where you wouldn't love them. And we treat everyone else, or we tend to treat everyone else in the same way. We put conditions on our love. And what we see is that it never makes sense to do that. It's the conditionality that's harmful. If we just open our heart, that is onward leading. That leads to a life of peace and happiness and love, which is what we're looking for. So we practice like this. We might be in this place for a long time too. But we practice and we put more and more love out into the world, and we see more and more love kind of coming into us, and we see something that's transformative. So you might kind of tend to look at the world, or look at how you show up in the world as, sometimes I'm kind, sometimes I'm not kind. Sometimes, I'm my heart is open and I'm sharing that with the world, and sometimes it's not, sometimes it's closed. But what we see is that when we're doing these things that might seem like our heart is closed, or like we're being unkind, we're doing them because of delusion, because of this delusion that this person out here is not, is different from me, is other than me, is not as important to me, and their suffering is not something I should care about as much as my own, if at all. It's just that delusion that veils the open heart. The open heart is always there. And so it's like, I guess the analogy that's coming to mind is like if you have a flashlight, right? And you put your hand over the flashlight, and maybe there's like a little gap between the fingers, so some light gets out. And you look at that, and you shine that on the wall, and you look at that, and you say that, okay, like some of that area is light, and a bunch of it is dark. but it's just your hand hiding the light that's innate. The delusion that we have about the world, this idea that you are separate from me, you are less than me, you are someone I should not care about. That is the delusion that veils the open heart, that's innate to us. And when we see that, that part of what we are, it completely changes how we see things. I'll give another analogy. Like it's like this glass of water, right? So there's some, like the kind of, I guess, typical or the way most folks would see this glass is there's some amount of water in here, right? And I could pour more out or pour more in, and there would be more or less water, but there's some water in some empty space. Well, that's not true. There's water here that appears as water, but there's water here in the form of water vapor. So this glass is always full of water, whether there's a little bit of the kind of liquid water or a lot. It's the same way with us. What we're expressing into the world is always this open heart. Maybe there's some delusion, or maybe there's some not delusion. Maybe there's not delusion. Maybe there's more, maybe there's less, but it's always this open heart. And that completely changes how you see yourself. I guess the hazard with talking about things this way is that when you just give the analogy, when you just give the words, like somebody might take that and say, oh, he's just kind of playing word games, or that's a nice way to look at things, but that's not really a big deal. But that is not the change that happens. It's not the change that happens up here in your mind. It's the change that happens. It goes all the way down. You see the truth of that in a way that's completely clear and not possible for you to doubt. What you are is the expression of an open heart. You are not anything other than that, ever. And so you can't hate yourself anymore. You can't look at yourself and be critical in the way that, I'm a bad person or something like that. Like you might look at your actions and, see that this is not helpful, or this caused harm, or, maybe even a lot of harm, but you can't think of yourself as someone who's anything other than just the expression of an open heart. This is Buddha nature. So what it means to have an open heart is to see Buddha nature in yourself. The corollary to this, or the follow-on, I think is, it feels like this way now, at least, but I will say it feels like my favorite thing in the world. Like it feels like my favorite part of the Dhamma that I've seen, is that just as you are Buddha nature, you are nothing but Buddha nature, you are nothing but this love, so too is everyone else. And so you can look at, people you care about, your family, your friends. You can look at people, on the sidewalk or in the park. You can look at people who are causing you harm and see Buddha nature. You can see this is love. This is, maybe there's delusion, maybe there's quite a bit of delusion there, but it's an expression of a heart that, does or doesn't understand the world. And that's a completely different way to live. Like the way we kind of tend to go about the world, I guess maybe I would call it a competition, right? There's all these people trying to do their own thing, and maybe they're opposed to you, or maybe you can kind of ally with them, and but you're trying to dominate the world. You're trying to make the world in the way that you want it. But when you see this, when you see Buddha nature in yourself and in others, it becomes a completely different project. The world is full of Buddhas. Just maybe some delusion is present, but it's a world full of Buddhas. And the only project is just to dispel the delusion. It's a completely different thing. It's a completely different thing. But that is freedom. That is freedom. So that's what it means to have an open heart. It's to see Buddha nature in yourself and Buddha nature in others, Buddha nature in the world. And I've kind of like laid out this progression, this like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this linear path, which is like nice and easy to explain and talk about. But when you examine your experience of practice, you might find that your movement through the world has not been quite so linear. And this is how it goes. This is true for everyone. It's not this like you are better in this moment than you were last moment for all moments. But there's this oscillation. You kind of go forward and see clearly, and then karma comes in, and you collapse back into a self, and you kind of karma subsides, and you go back into the world, and you see clearly again, and there's this sort of pattern, and the same sort of pattern with the heart. The heart opens and the heart closes. So what it means to have an open heart is to accept that. But so everyone has this pattern, this oscillation of kind of open and closed, whether or not they practice. But when we practice, what happens is we kind of lean a little bit on the side of openness. We go a bit further, we see a bit more clearly. And then when we inevitably coalesce back into a separate self, what happens is you take some of that truth you've seen, some of the knowledge that you found about Buddha nature, and you bring it back to this separate sense of self. And so it's not quite so strong, or not quite so hard. The truth of Buddha nature kind of shines through. There's an analogy I like. Imagine you're outside and you're looking up in the sky, and sometimes the sky is clear and it's very lovely, and it's very easy to see the sun shining. But sometimes the clouds come in, and it's not quite so pleasant, and maybe they completely cover the sky and you can't see the sun anymore. Somebody who doesn't understand how the world works might look up and say the sun is not shining anymore. It's just clouds. Somebody who understands how the world works knows that the sun is shining. It didn't go anywhere. It's just kind of being veiled. And the analogy here is to our suffering. Like, our suffering comes and goes, right? There's this oscillation to it. But when we know how the world works, when we know that this world is just an expression of love, it's not held in the same way. It's not so dark. And there's another kind of quality to it too. Like, we don't just sort of know the truth of things. We start to see it. So in the analogy, it would be like the clouds start to become transparent. And the more we see the truth of the world, the more the sun shines through, even when the clouds are there. And that is freedom, to live in a world of suffering, but to know the truth. That is freedom. So this brings me to the last point I wanted to mention. I've heard variants of this question a couple of times, maybe like 2 or 3 times in the past couple of months. What does it mean to have an open heart in a world that's so full of suffering? Well, it means to stick to your practice. Like, if you're suffering, take care of yourself. When you have space, when you have the capacity, look out in the world and take care of others too. That can be very skillful. But the best thing you can do for the world, I think in most cases at least, is to cultivate this truth, is to follow your practice, to see this for yourself. Because what happens when everybody's outside and they're looking up at the sky and it's covered in clouds and it's dark and there's thunder and lightning. Many people don't understand the truth of the world and they're very scared. But if you do, you start to shine. You start to, this truth kind of naturally presents itself in your body and mind, your actions. When the world seems full of suffering and you are able to act with love and with equanimity and with peace, you show others that this world is not completely suffering. You can show them the way out. And this is, I think, the greatest gift that we can give people. So what does it mean to have an open heart in a world that's full of suffering? It doesn't mean to ignore the suffering. It doesn't mean to act without thinking, without wisdom. It means to stick to your practice. It means to cultivate this truth and to share it with others. That's what I have to offer today. Thank you all for coming. We'll open the floor to questions in a minute, but I think we have some announcements. So on the 23rd, Dhammadippa is doing a virtual tour of the Smithsonian Museum of Asian Art. And this isn't on the calendar, but I believe we're closed next week. Is that true?
No, I'm not going to be able to do it.
Okay. Ignore that. Okay. Also on the 30th, there's a Sangha brunch. Everyone is very welcome. That will be after the Sunday program.
Hosted by you.
Yes, hosted by me. There are more events on the website, quite a bit coming up. So I'll be happy to take questions or comments. Any random thing that comes in your head is welcome.
I'm still in the dark, but this is Julia.
Hi, Julia.
I really appreciated in the meditation, your last, I think it was your very last comment was to just let it go. Because I was struggling, I was trying to get focused and be mindful and it was really great to be given permission to,
yeah.
And then then I was mindful and I was very calm, the whole thing. It's So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, there's this like great belief that we always have to be doing something in meditation. And of course, sometimes it is helpful to do things, but it's also completely okay sometimes to just let it go. So you have my permission to give yourself permission not to do anything anytime you like. Yeah, thank you, Julia. Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Got a few things to, offer and a question, I think, in there. So the first is, this afternoon I was walking and remembering that tonight was Tuesday, and I had looked on the calendar earlier and realized that you were teaching. And I just want to say that the thought occurred to me, like, Stephen always somehow expresses the joy of the Dharma when he teaches. I really felt that tonight, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
The second is, I was also trying something new in the meditation that was kind of a little prompted by what you said, something at one point, which is instead of rushing back when I realized I was lost and try to like grab back onto the breath, what you were saying about awareness allowed me to play with the idea that, okay, I've now like grabbed onto another object, usually a thought. Let me just let that go and wait for the breath to come back into awareness. I couldn't always do it, but I just wanted to say that there was something in your prompt, and that was like that brought a lot more ease to the practice. Just wanted to share that as well. And then in terms of your talk, I think is where my question is. Yeah, maybe the question is, and I appreciate what you said, is like you presented it as this linear path, but really it's like this, coming in and out process. But when it is dark and stormy and there's thunder and lightning, like what do you find helpful to remember that the sun is still up there? Like that difference of seeing the suffering and seeing the truth that you were talking about, seeing the clouds and seeing the sun. Yeah, like, any additional suggestions there?
Well, was that available to you when I spoke about, looking at your actions and being able to see kind of the love, even when it doesn't sort of appear that way first? Like, was that like that's something that I think might be helpful. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think what I'm thinking about is, I know that there are particular mind states that arise that when I'm not in them, right? And I look back at those mind states and anticipate, like, okay, that mind state will probably come again. Like, I think I should be able to recognize that, oh, that's that mind state, right? That's that mind state that really gets me deluded and, causes me to lose sight of the light that is inside me and the light that is inside of others. And then, it comes again and whoof, like swept away. So I guess I'm looking for like something that could remind me in the midst of that, like, Chris, this is the mind state. Remember, this is the one, this is the squall that you're familiar with, yeah. I don't know. It's probably just more practice, of that kind of process of, bringing as much awareness to it as I can.
I guess the thing that comes to mind is that, like, that's not, from wherever you are, that's not a journey. Like, it's not a journey you have to go to. It's right there. It's always just like a thing you can let go of in that moment. If that makes sense. Like, it's always, whatever it is you're holding on to, if you let go, there's the sun. There's the sun, like shining there for you to see. Like, it's not, maybe you're in like a kind of very deep, dark pit, and you might think, it's going to take a lot of work to get me out of this. But it's not ever that. It's always just letting go of what you're holding on to in that moment.
Yeah, and it's just like the last comment I made about the breath, actually.
Yeah.
It's just not scale, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Oh, yeah.
Just to add one small thing to that is to say, maybe just try to remember those moments when you could see it. Remember those moments in the past when you could see it and have some pamoja for that, right? Some sort of like positive, hey, there was a time, right? When it felt very present for me, or when I knew that thing. And that's a recollection that can be very helpful.
Well, Sig.
So, yeah, I'm kind of in a blue state right now. It's kind of and I think so I'm seeing that, but I feel it's like a sense of one step forward, two steps back, instead
Yeah.
of, half a step back, one step forward.
Yeah.
And I remember the moments when when there's a sense of freedom, and that's usually when there's a linkage of feeling the discovery of the curiosity just finds the flow, and so there's never a sense of stuckness, at least perceived that way. Except then it can get there can be an overexcitement for me about that, and when there's an overexcitement, then um, I'll do things that will, um, knock over some books or something, whatever, just, and it's when I do that, I say, well, there's a reminder, just pay attention. But you can hear my voice, so I said, pay attention. There's an irritation with not being able to remember.
Yeah.
Um, and then, the whole cycle starts over again. But I think for me right now, I'm missing not being able to eat food,
Mm,
and it doesn't feel good. I mean, I
yeah.
can really, I feel I'm missing the joys of food. And I thought that certain mind states that would come up, like I could feel lots of energy, and usually when there's all this energy that's in the field, there's a sense of that sort of takes over and negates the other stuff, if you will. But I just wanted to come clean and saying, "Hey, I'm blue right now." So, and I recognize it will pass. And usually, when it does pass, the sense of it seems to pass with a deepening of the practice.
Yeah.
So that's what I remember. Each time that there's this cycle, there seems to be a progressive deepening, and so I can remember that phase, in and out, the cycle, the cyclical nature of things. And but when you're in the midst of it, which I'm
Yeah.
in sort of right now, if I
Yeah.
don't if I really pay attention, I'm not happy. Okay,
Yeah.
I miss not being happy. It's
Yeah.
kind of, I'm used to being happy a lot, so it's
Yeah.
so anyway, it's a um, yeah. I wanted to come clean and say, hey, I'm not, it always doesn't work here. Okay. Or
Yeah.
there's a delusion, there's a falling into the delusion of
Yeah.
that. And so I can try to remember that. You're just in a delusional state of not seeing
Yeah.
things more clearly and wait for better things to come arise. And usually when
Yeah.
with the passage of phenomena and how one is dealing with it, something happens and
Yeah.
suddenly you're snapped out of it. That's the magic of the whole
Yeah.
practice, I think. Just so yeah, and it's always good to hear other people. I mean, I feel like they're great reminders of, yeah, you that hasn't left you either. You're in that state too. You can remember that, and so the reality check of Sangha, I guess, is what's so powerful to feel that. And so I'm grateful for being. I feel very tired. I said I'm not going to
Yeah.
get up for this.
No.
But I couldn't help myself. So I just sort of, it's sort of like Chris's comment. I couldn't help myself. There's something good will come out of this. And I think afterwards I'll realize maybe what that was. I'm not realizing yet right now. So we'll see. Yeah, that's it for me right now. Yeah.
Well, Stig, your presence is always appreciated. Thank you. Thank you for making the effort. Thank you for sharing that, it's not always roses. I think when folks share, there's like a definite tendency to like only share when it's positive. And I appreciate you providing the counterbalance. Um, I also appreciate how you find curiosity and you have interest even when it's not seemingly kind of like irrespective of what's going on. You seem to always be able to find interest in the world just as it is, and I appreciate that.
I think the thing is also to tame it down a bit for me.
Mm,
I was trying too hard, basically, to try
yeah,
to figure out what's going on here.
yeah,
investigate, really feel the dukkha, but it was
Yeah.
just too much of an effort to do that. It comes back to the acrobat, you know,
Yeah.
the metaphor that you're describing, which is very good, I think. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks much.
Yeah. Well, you know that self that wants to understand, it's a form of dukkha too. There's, you know, more and less skillful forms of self, and it can be a very skillful one, but it can also be a form of dukkha. Yeah. Yeah.
Patience,
Yeah.
patience, patience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm done. So
Hi, Julia.
Julie has her hand up. Are you waving goodbye? I don't know.
Well, no, I thought you were finished. I'm sorry. I didn't want to stop
No,
you.
I'm fine. I am fine. I need to
Okay.
figure. Yeah. Okay.
Something one of you guys said, you know, it was one of you, you know, you were speaking, but something about moment by moment. I don't know if you used the term moment by moment, but it seemed to me, and I've never thought about this before, not in this way, but as part of the practice, maybe it's awareness or it's dealing with some negative emotion or some unpleasant, you know, whatever. It's to bring in the awareness and accept that it may be for a moment and go away and for a moment and go away. But I think that's sort of what you're saying is cyclical. But at least appreciate.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in the practice today, I was getting very frustrated. And, you know, I don't usually do that. I usually am more accepting about, you know, the thoughts and all the stuff going around. But tonight I was frustrated because I couldn't seem to get hold of anything until you said relax. And if we had meditated for another 30 minutes, it'd probably been great. But it made okay. So there, that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I appreciate the moments that are.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's very helpful when you're doing that to kind of give yourself a mental pat on the back when you have one of those moments. Like I know for me, you know, there's a bit of like perfectionist tendency, and I can, you know, see this space where I've been sitting, and like, you know, I've been, you know, even if I'm present 90% of the time, which, you know, good luck with that, but I'll see the 10% that I'm not, and you know, that maybe that doesn't feel so good, but really anything you do in that regard is a benefit to you. Like if you sat for 30 minutes and you had one moment of being aware, that's one moment where you weren't pulled around by whatever, you know, whatever your karma was doing to you. It's one moment you were present, one moment that could still just a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. One moment is better than no moments. Yeah. All right, friends. It was lovely to be with you all. Hope you have a wonderful week. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all. Take good care.
Same here, and meditate, everyone.
To you too.
Bye, everyone.